The first time I stepped onto that ranch, I wasn't expecting anything more than the smell of hay, the sound of horses, and the nervous thrill of learning how to ride. But fate had a different plan. Her eyes caught mine before I even touched the saddle. Sharp, steady, with a confidence that made me feel both exposed and drawn in. She was the trainer, the one meant to guide me. But what happened that day went far beyond lessons in reins and posture. One unexpected kiss in the middle of the wide, sunlit arena shattered everything I thought I knew about control, boundaries, and myself. What followed was a story I never imagined living, a story of tension, desire, and emotions I could hardly name at the time. If you've ever felt that rush when someone unexpected changes your world in a single touch, then stay with me, because this story will take you into a whirlwind of passion, doubt, and discovery. And before I tell you what happened after her lips touched mine, make sure to subscribe, turn on notifications, and join me until the very end of this unforgettable journey. When I first signed up for horseback riding lessons, I expected nothing more than a new hobby, maybe a bit of freedom away from my routine. The ranch sat at the edge of town, surrounded by rolling fields that smelled faintly of wildflowers and dust. It was the kind of place where silence had its own presence, broken only by the low whinnies of horses or the creak of leather saddles hanging in the barn. I didn't know then that those fields would become the backdrop for one of the most confusing and exhilarating chapters of my life. She was waiting for me the moment I arrived, Alyssa, the trainer. Tall, confident, her dark hair tied back loosely so strands fell against her sun-kissed cheeks. She had a kind of presence that filled the space, not loud or overbearing, but steady, like the calm authority of someone who knew her world better than anyone else. She looked at me the way trainers look at first-time riders, measuring, assessing, but with an intensity that seemed to linger a second too long. "First time?" she asked, her tone low and certain, almost amused. "Yes," I admitted, brushing invisible dust off my jeans, suddenly aware of how unprepared I looked. "Don't worry," she said, walking closer. "The horse will sense your nerves before I do." Her lips curved into a smile that was both reassuring and teasing, and I felt something stir inside me, something I wasn't ready to name. She introduced me to a chestnut mare named Willow, whose gentle eyes and steady breath calmed me more than I expected. As Alyssa placed my hand on the horse's neck, guiding it with her own, I felt a jolt of warmth run through me. Not from the animal, but from the trainer's hand resting lightly over mine. Her skin was warm, her fingers strong yet careful, and I pulled in a breath too sharp, hoping she didn't notice. But of course she did. She tilted her head slightly, her eyes catching mine with a knowing glint. "Relax," she said softly, her voice dropping in tone. "It's about trust." Was she talking about the horse or about something else entirely? I couldn't tell. The first lesson was awkward. I struggled to mount properly, my body stiff as Alyssa adjusted the stirrups with a patience that carried a hint of mischief. "Loosen up," she said, brushing her hand against my thigh as she checked the leather straps. The touch was professional, I told myself. She was a trainer, doing her job. But every cell in my body disagreed. When I finally sat in the saddle, Alyssa stood close, her hand resting against Willow's neck. "Keep your back straight," she instructed. "Let your hips move with the horse, not against it. Feel the rhythm." Her words, though meant for riding, felt like something deeper, an invitation, perhaps, to stop fighting myself as I tried to follow her instructions. My eyes drifted to the way her shirt clung to her shoulders, the strength in her posture, the way the sunlight caught in her hair. It was wrong to notice, wasn't it? She was my trainer. I was her student. This was supposed to be simple. But the longer I spent in her presence, the more impossible it became to pretend I didn't feel the pull. Halfway through the lesson, I nearly lost my balance. Willow shifted suddenly, and I clutched the reins too tightly, panic surging through me. Alyssa moved fast, one hand steadying my back, the other taking control of the reins. Her chest pressed against my shoulder for a brief, breathless moment, and I froze. "You're okay," she said, her voice close to my ear, calm and steady. Her breath grazed my skin, sending a shiver down my spine. I turned my head slightly, and for the first time, our faces were only inches apart. Her eyes lingered on me, searching, daring. The world around us blurred, the fields, the horses, the noise of the ranch, and there was only her. Close enough that I could feel the warmth radiating from her body. For a heartbeat, I thought she was going to kiss me right then. My chest tightened, my lips parting slightly, as if bracing for something I couldn't admit I wanted. But instead she pulled back, adjusting the reins in my hands with brisk efficiency. "You'll get the hang of it," she said, her voice back to professional, though her eyes betrayed something unspoken. The lesson ended, but I couldn't shake the way she looked at me before walking away. It wasn't just an instructor's pride in her students' progress. It was something heavier, charged. As I left the ranch, I kept replaying that moment when she steadied me, when her face was close enough that I swore she could hear the wild pounding of my heart. I asked myself questions I didn't have answers to. Did she feel it too? Or was I reading into gestures that meant nothing? That night, lying in bed, the memory of her voice echoed in my head. It's about trust. Was she teaching me to trust Willow, or was she asking me to trust her with something more? I turned on my side, restless, staring at the dark ceiling. I knew this wasn't supposed to happen. It was only the first lesson, and yet she had already found her way under my skin. The problem was, I wasn't sure if I wanted her out. And then, just as I was beginning to drift into uneasy sleep, my phone buzzed on the nightstand. It was a message from an unknown number. "You looked beautiful on Willow today. Don't overthink it." I sat up, my heart racing. Alyssa, she had crossed a line, one she could never uncross. And now so had I. The question burned inside me as I stared at the glowing screen. Was this the beginning of something real, or was I about to step into something dangerous that I wasn't ready for? The next morning, I stared at Alyssa's message again and again, as if the words might change under my gaze. "You looked beautiful on Willow today. Don't overthink it." It was short, almost casual, but it carried the weight of something unspoken. Trainers don't normally message their students like that, and certainly not with words like beautiful. I typed out half a dozen responses before deleting them all. I didn't want to sound too eager, but I also didn't want to pretend I hadn't felt something yesterday. Finally, I sent, "Thank you. I really enjoyed the lesson. When's the next one?" Her reply came within minutes. "Whenever you want. I'll make time." Something about that phrasing, "I'll make time," tightened my chest. She wasn't just fitting me into her schedule. She was offering me priority. I set the lesson for the following afternoon, though part of me wondered if I was walking into something I didn't fully understand. When I arrived at the ranch again, the air felt heavier, charged with anticipation. Alyssa was already waiting near the stables, dressed in jeans and a fitted shirt that looked effortlessly perfect. Her confidence unsettled me. She smiled when she saw me, but it wasn't the easy, professional smile of a trainer. It was softer, deliberate, like she knew exactly the effect it would have on me. "Back so soon?" she asked, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear. I couldn't stay away, I admitted, before I could stop myself. Her smile deepened at my honesty, and I quickly turned toward Willow, pretending to fuss with the reins, to hide the heat rising to my cheeks. The lesson began with the usual instructions, but her tone had shifted. She stood closer than necessary, her hand lingering a beat too long when she adjusted the reins in my grip. Every time her fingers brushed against mine, sparks shot through me. "Your posture is better," she said, walking around the horse to stand behind me. Her voice was low, close, almost intimate. "You're starting to trust yourself." "I'm trying," I said, my breath catching as her hand lightly touched the small of my back. Guiding me into position, the rest of the session blurred into a haze of tension I couldn't shake. She moved around me with the quiet confidence of someone who knew exactly what she was doing, not just with the horse, but with me. At one point, as Willow slowed to a halt, Alyssa leaned in close, her lips near my ear. "You're a natural," she said softly. The compliment should have been simple, harmless. But the way her voice dipped, the way her eyes lingered on me when I turned, made my heart pound in my chest. After the lesson, she didn't leave as quickly as the first time. Instead, she walked me toward the stables, her hand brushing against mine, as if testing the boundaries of how far she could go. I felt the brush of her knuckles, a fleeting touch that made me want more. Inside the barn, the sunlight streamed through the wooden slats, casting golden beams across the hay-strewn floor. The smell of leather and dust filled the air, grounding me even as my pulse quickened. Alyssa leaned casually against the stall door, watching me as I tried to calm my nerves. "Why do you keep looking at me like that?" I finally asked, my voice shaky but curious, her eyes locked onto mine, unflinching. "Because you already know the answer," she said. I froze. Every part of me wanted to demand clarification, to make her spell it out. But at the same time, I was terrified of what that confirmation might mean. Before I could respond, footsteps echoed outside the barn. A man's voice called out Alyssa's name, breaking the moment. She straightened quickly, her expression shifting back into something neutral. A ranch hand appeared, asking about supplies, and Alyssa handled it smoothly, like nothing had happened. But when her eyes flicked back to me, I caught the shadow of something raw and unguarded. That interruption left me restless. She had practically admitted something, and yet here we were, back to the unspoken tension. As I prepared to leave, Alyssa walked me to my car. The silence between us was heavier than words. Just before I opened the door, she leaned in slightly, her hand grazing my arm. "I wasn't joking about yesterday," she said softly. "You were beautiful, and you still are." The honesty in her voice unraveled me. My breath hitched, and for a moment I thought she might actually kiss me, right there in the parking lot. But instead, she stepped back, giving me space, but leaving me tangled in longing. That night I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying her words, the near misses, the way her presence filled every corner of my thoughts. I wanted to believe it was real, that she felt the same pull I did. But doubt gnawed at me. What if I was misreading everything? What if this was all in my head? I almost convinced myself of that until I saw the message, "Come tomorrow." After lessons, don't tell anyone. The secrecy of it all sent a chill down my spine. Was this reckless? Dangerous? Maybe. But my heart didn't care. It was already hers, even if I couldn't say it out loud yet. As I lay in the dark, phone clutched against my chest, one question consumed me. What exactly was waiting for me after tomorrow's lessons? The following day, the sun burned hotter than usual as I drove back to the ranch. My heart raced the entire way, hands gripping the wheel as if holding myself together. Alyssa's message echoed over and over in my mind, "Come tomorrow." After lessons. Don't tell anyone. The secrecy thrilled me, but it also terrified me. Why hide something if it wasn't dangerous? I parked and walked to the stables with my pulse pounding, wondering if anyone else could see how nervous I was. When I entered, Alyssa was already there. She looked calm, collected, her hair tied back neatly, her expression unreadable. For everyone else, it was just another day at the ranch. But the moment her eyes met mine, I felt the silent current between us, a pull that left no room for denial. "Ready to ride?" she asked, her voice steady but her eyes carrying a flicker of something deeper. The lesson passed with almost mechanical precision. Her instructions were clipped, professional, as though she was deliberately building walls between us while others were around. I tried to focus on Willow, on my posture, on the rhythm of the ride, but every nerve in my body screamed at me to get through it, to reach whatever awaited after. When the other students finished, Alyssa dismissed them one by one. My chest tightened as I realized I was the only one left. She leaned against the stall door, waiting, her gaze steady. "Stay behind," she said quietly once the last student left. I obeyed, my hands shaky as I guided Willow back into her stall. The silence of the empty barn pressed in around me, broken only by the shifting hooves of horses and the creak of leather. Alyssa approached, her steps measured, her expression softened now that we were alone. "You came," she said, almost like a confession. "I told you I would," I replied. Though my voice sounded smaller than I intended, she stopped inches from me, close enough that I could smell the faint trace of sweat mixed with lavender from her shampoo. Her eyes searched mine, and for a moment I thought she might finally bridge the distance, but before anything could happen, a loud noise shattered the stillness, a sharp crack of wood breaking, followed by a horse's terrified whinny. Willow lurched inside her stall, kicking at the wall. Another horse bolted down the narrow passage, its reins dragging dangerously. Instinctively, Alyssa rushed forward, her body moving with fierce control as she grabbed the reins before the horse could hurt itself. The animal thrashed, nearly knocking her off balance. "Get back!" She shouted at me, her voice strong and commanding, but I couldn't move. My heart pounded as I watched her fight for control, muscles straining, hair falling loose around her face. In that chaos, something inside me snapped. I wasn't just attracted to her. I was terrified of losing her finally. With a mix of force and calm words, she managed to steady the horse, stroking its neck until it settled. She breathed hard, sweat glistening across her forehead, and when she turned back to me, her eyes burned with adrenaline. "You okay?" she asked, her voice rough, her chest rising and falling rapidly. I nodded, but my throat tightened. The sight of her like that, fearless, strong, in control, left me shaken in ways I didn't expect. She stepped closer, her hand brushing my arm. "You didn't move," she said softly, almost like an accusation, but there was wonder in her tone. "I couldn't," I admitted. "I was scared for you." Her hand lingered on me, warm and steady. "You shouldn't be. I can handle myself, but it means something that you cared." The silence stretched, heavy with unspoken words. Then she did something I hadn't expected. She tucked a loose strand of hair behind my ear, her fingers grazing my skin in a touch that felt deliberate, intimate. My breath caught, and I knew this was no accident. "Alyssa." I began, my voice faltering. She leaned in, her lips dangerously close to mine, close enough that I could feel the warmth of her breath. For a moment, the world seemed to shrink to just us, the barn, the horses, the dust floating in the golden light. But she pulled back, leaving me trembling. "I shouldn't," she said quickly, shaking her head. "This is complicated." Her retreat hurt more than I wanted to admit, but I refused to let the moment slip away. "Why did you ask me to stay then? Why send me that message?" Her eyes flickered, torn between fear and desire. "Because I couldn't stop myself," she admitted. "But wanting you doesn't make it easy." The honesty in her words hit me like a wave. I reached out, my fingers brushing hers, testing if she would let me in. She didn't pull away, but her jaw tightened, as if she was fighting an invisible battle inside herself. For a moment I thought she might finally surrender to whatever was between us. But then voices echoed from outside, the sound of footsteps approaching. She jerked her hand back, stepping away so quickly it left me breathless. "Not here," she said firmly, her professional mask snapping back into place. The barn door creaked open as two workers walked in, carrying tools. Alyssa turned toward them, already slipping into casual conversation, her body language cool and detached. I stood frozen, my pulse still hammering, struggling to process what had just happened. When the workers left again, she turned back to me, her expression softened, but her tone careful. "Come back tomorrow. Same time, please." I should have said no. I should have told her I couldn't keep doing this to myself. This push and pull, this game of almosts. But instead, I found myself nodding, my voice barely steady. "I'll be here." Her smile was small but real, and it pierced straight through me. "Then maybe I'll have the courage to stop running." The way she said it left me with no answers, only questions that swirled in my chest like a storm. As I walked back to my car, the image of her nearly kissing me replayed in my mind, each detail burning hotter than the last, and yet one truth grew louder with every step. Tomorrow might finally bring the moment I had been waiting for, or it might shatter everything completely. The next day felt heavier, like the air itself knew I was carrying a secret too big for my chest. As I pulled into the gravel lot at the ranch, I saw Alyssa near the paddock, her back to me, working with one of the more restless horses. Even from a distance, I could sense her focus, the kind of determination that made me admire her even before I realized what else I felt. She didn't look up when I walked in, though I knew she'd seen me. Her shoulders were tense, her movements sharper than usual. Something was wrong. When the lesson ended and the last student left, she motioned for me to stay, just like before. My heart raced, but before I could speak, she said, "Come with me." Her tone was clipped, not like the gentle undercurrent she'd used yesterday. I followed her out of the stables, across the field, until we reached a small wooden fence that overlooked the pastures. She stopped there, resting her hands on the rail, her head bent. "I couldn't sleep last night," she admitted, her voice low but firm. "Because of you, because of what almost happened." The confession hit me like a stone, but before I could respond, a voice called out behind us, "Hey, Alyssa!" I turned to see another trainer walking toward us. He was older, gruff, with suspicion written across his face. "Got a minute? The owners are asking about you." His gaze shifted to me, then back to her. Something in the way he looked made my stomach twist. Alyssa stiffened. "I'll be right there," she said quickly, but the trainer didn't leave. He folded his arms. "You've been spending a lot of time with this one," he remarked, jerking his chin toward me. His tone wasn't casual. It carried weight, like an accusation. Heat rose in my face. Alyssa's jaw tightened, and for a second I thought she might deny it altogether. Instead, she replied coldly, "That's none of your business." The man gave a humorless laugh. "Just saying people notice. And you know what the owners think about distractions." With that, he walked away, leaving a silence so heavy I could barely breathe. Alyssa cursed under her breath, her fists clenched against the fence. "Damn it," she muttered. "This is exactly what I was afraid of." My chest ached. "Are we a distraction?" I asked, my voice breaking slightly. Her eyes flicked to mine, raw and conflicted. "No, but that's what they'll think. And if they do, if word spreads, I could lose this job. This ranch is everything to me." I wanted to reach for her, to tell her we could keep it hidden, that her fears didn't have to end us before we even began. But the way she looked at me, torn apart between desire and duty, left me trembling. "Alyssa," I said softly, "you can't keep running from this. From us, because whether we say it out loud or not, it's there. Everyone can feel it, even him." She turned away, her breathing ragged. "And that terrifies me." I stepped closer, my voice shaking but determined. "It terrifies me too, but I don't want to pretend anymore." For the first time, she looked like she might break, like the weight she carried was too much. Her eyes shimmered, but she blinked the tears back, her lips pressed tight. Before she could answer, a sudden commotion erupted behind us, panicked shouts, hooves striking dirt. We spun around to see one of the younger horses had slipped free from the paddock, charging wild toward the open field. Without hesitation, Alyssa bolted. I followed, my legs straining to keep up as she sprinted across the grass. The horse kicked and reared, threatening to crash into the fence line. Alyssa grabbed a lunge line from the ground, her body moving with precision. But it was dangerous. One wrong move, and she could be trampled. My heart thundered as I ran closer, desperate to help, but she shouted at me, "Stay back!" Still, I couldn't just stand there. I picked up a rope from the fence and tried to circle around, my hands trembling. The horse's eyes were wide with fear, its breath hot and fast. Alyssa's voice was calm, but firm, as she maneuvered closer, the way only she could, her movement steady like an anchor in the chaos. Finally, with a sudden surge, she managed to slip the rope over its head, pulling it to a halt. The animal jerked, then stilled under her touch, her words low and soothing. When it was finally safe, she collapsed against the fence, her chest heaving. I rushed to her side, dropping to my knees. "Are you okay?" I gasped. She nodded, though her hands were scraped raw, her face pale from the exertion. "Yeah, just a little shaken." I grabbed her hands without thinking, holding them gently. "You could have been killed," I said, my voice trembling. Her eyes met mine, wide and vulnerable. "So could you," she whispered. "You ran in after me. Because I couldn't just watch," I said fiercely. "Because you matter to me more than you realize." Her lips parted, as if words failed her. The distance between us disappeared, and before I could think twice, I leaned closer, my forehead resting against hers. "This isn't just a distraction, Alyssa," I said, my voice breaking. "It's real, and I can't keep pretending it's not." Her breath hitched, her hands tightening around mine. For a moment I thought she might finally let go of her fear. But then the sound of footsteps echoed again. The same trainer from before, heading back across the field. Alyssa pulled away sharply, her walls slamming back into place. She stood, brushing dirt from her jeans, her face unreadable. "We can't do this here," she said, her tone hard. The trainer stopped a few feet away, eyeing us suspiciously. "Everything okay?" Alyssa forced a smile, her voice steady. "Yeah, horse broke loose, but it's fine now." The man nodded, though his gaze lingered too long. Then he left again, and the silence that followed was unbearable. Alyssa turned to me, her expression pained. "Meet me tonight, away from here, if you really want this." "Meet me?" My heart skipped. "Where?" "The old cabin near the North Trail," she said quickly. 8 o'clock. Her eyes held mine for one final, searing second before she walked away, leaving me shaking with adrenaline, fear, and a hunger that burned stronger than ever. That night could change everything, for better or worse. The drive up the North Trail felt like forever, even though it was barely 15 minutes from town. My hands gripped the wheel tighter than they should have, every turn of the road echoing the pounding of my heart. When I finally pulled up near the old cabin, the headlights cast long shadows against its weathered wood, making it look both inviting and intimidating. I cut the engine and sat there for a moment, listening to the sound of my own breath. A part of me wanted to run, to avoid whatever waited for me inside. But another part, the louder one, knew that if I didn't step out now, I'd regret it for the rest of my life. The door creaked when I pushed it open, the hinges groaning with age. A faint glow flickered inside, and for a terrifying second, I thought I was alone. Then I saw her. Alyssa stood by the small fireplace, its flames casting soft light across her face. Her hair was loose, her jacket draped across a chair. She looked up as I entered, and for once she didn't look like the composed trainer I had met weeks ago. She looked exposed. "You came," she said, her voice carrying both relief and dread. "Of course I did." My throat was dry, but I forced the words out. "You asked me to." Alyssa crossed her arms, like she was trying to hold herself together. "I didn't think you'd actually do it." I stepped closer, my nerves fading with every breath. "Why not?" Her eyes darted to the fire. "Because this is dangerous. For both of us. I'm your trainer. I'm supposed to be professional. And if anyone knew we were here..." She trailed off, shaking her head. I swallowed hard. "Alyssa, do you really care more about what they think than about what you feel?" Her jaw clenched, and the silence stretched so long that I thought she wouldn't answer. Finally she said, "What I feel terrifies me." That admission made my chest tighten. I took another step forward. "Then tell me. Tell me what you feel." Her breath caught, and for a moment her hands trembled against her arms. "You make me lose control," she admitted, her voice raw. "Every time I see you, I fight myself. I tell myself it's wrong, that it's reckless, that it'll ruin everything I've built here. But then you look at me and..." She broke off, her eyes burning with something I'd never seen so clearly before. "I can't breathe." The fire popped, filling the silence. I felt like the ground beneath me had shifted, like nothing would ever be the same again. "Then stop fighting," I said softly. For a moment we just stood there, caught in the gravity of a decision neither of us could undo. Then she moved. She crossed the room in 2 strides and pressed her lips against mine, and suddenly everything I had been aching for ignited at once. The kiss was fierce, desperate, almost angry at first. My hands found her shoulders, clinging as if she might vanish if I let go. Her fingers tangled in my hair, pulling me closer, and for a second there was no fear. No consequences, just heat and hunger. When we finally pulled apart, gasping for air, Alyssa pressed her forehead against mine. "This is insane," she whispered, her voice shaking. "Then let's be insane together," I replied, tears stinging my eyes. "I don't care if it's reckless. I don't care if it's wrong. I just know it feels right." Her lips curved into a trembling smile, but before she could answer, the sound of a car engine outside made us freeze. My stomach dropped. Alyssa grabbed my wrist, pulling me away from the window. "Someone's here," she hissed. The headlights swept across the cabin walls, and for a terrifying second I thought it was the trainer who had confronted us earlier. We held our breath as the car idled, then slowly turned around and drove back down the trail. The silence that followed was deafening. Alyssa let go of my wrist, her chest heaving. "Do you see now? This is what I mean. If anyone knew—" I caught her hand again, refusing to let the fear win. "Then let's not tell anyone, not yet. But don't push me away, Alyssa. Not when I know you feel this too." Her eyes shimmered, torn between terror and longing. Finally she whispered, "You're right. I do feel it. And I can't deny it anymore." Something inside me cracked open then, flooding me with relief and joy and fear all at once. I pulled her into my arms, holding her tightly as if the world outside could never touch us here. But deep down, I knew the world wouldn't stay outside forever. When we finally sat down by the fire, our hands still intertwined, she looked at me with an intensity that burned straight through me. "If we do this," she said slowly, "there's no turning back." I squeezed her hand. "I don't want to turn back." Her lips brushed mine again, softer this time, almost reverent. "Then tomorrow," she said, "we face whatever comes, together." My heart soared, but beneath the glow of the fire, a shadow lingered. Tomorrow could mean everything, or it could tear us apart. And as I lay awake on the worn couch later that night, listening to her quiet breathing beside me, one thought repeated in my mind: tomorrow the world would demand answers. The morning sunlight spilled through the thin curtains of the cabin, painting everything in pale gold. I woke before Alyssa did, my heart still heavy with the memory of the car that had stopped outside last night. For a moment, I just watched her sleep, her face softened, her breathing steady. She looked so different without the weight of control she always carried in public. Peaceful, vulnerable, mine. But reality pressed in quickly. Today wasn't a dream. Today, we'd have to decide what to do with what had happened between us. She stirred, opening her eyes slowly, and when she saw me, she smiled in a way that melted the knots in my chest. "Good morning," she said softly. "Good morning," I replied, brushing a strand of hair from her face. But the words that followed carried a shadow. "We need to talk." Her smile faded, but she nodded. "I know." We sat at the small table by the window, the fire long since burned out, the silence thick. Outside the woods looked alive, but in here time felt suspended. "What happened last night?" I began, my voice trembling. "I don't regret it. Not for a second. But if we go back down that trail and pretend nothing happened, it's going to destroy me." Alyssa's eyes fell to the table. Her hands tightened into fists, then slowly opened again. "You think it wouldn't destroy me too? I've spent years building a life here, my reputation, my career. Everything depends on discipline, boundaries. And you break every wall I've ever built." I reached for her hand, my pulse racing. Then maybe those walls needed to break. Her eyes lifted to mine, shining with fear and longing. For a moment I thought she'd pull away. Instead, she intertwined her fingers with mine. "You make it sound so simple," she whispered. "It's not simple," I admitted. "It's terrifying. But so is the thought of losing you." Her lips parted, but before she could respond, we heard the crunch of tires on gravel again. My stomach dropped. She shot up from her chair, her eyes darting to the window. This time the car didn't turn back. It parked. The engine cut. We both froze. A knock sounded on the cabin door, sharp and deliberate. My pulse thundered in my ears. Alyssa pressed a finger to her lips, motioning for silence. But the knock came again, louder this time. Finally, she moved toward the door, her steps measured. She opened it just enough to see outside, her shoulders tensing. Then she exhaled in relief. "It's just Hannah," she said, turning back to me. Hannah, one of the stable owners, stepped inside, looking between us with suspicion. "You two vanished last night," she said. "I figured I'd find you here." I felt my chest tighten, certain she knew everything. Alyssa crossed her arms, regaining a fraction of her usual composure. "We needed to talk privately." Hannah studied us for a long moment before nodding. "Whatever it is, you'd better be careful. People in town love to gossip." Her voice softened slightly as she looked at Alyssa. "Especially about you." When she finally left, the silence in the cabin was deafening again. Alyssa leaned back against the door, her hands trembling. "She knows," I said. "She suspects," Alyssa corrected, but her voice was thin. "And that's enough." I stood, crossing the room to her. "So what do we do now? Keep hiding until the walls close in? Or finally admit this is real?" Her eyes searched mine, desperate, terrified, but then something shifted in her expression. Resignation, yes, but also resolve. She cupped my face in her hands, her touch firm. "If I lose everything because of this, then so be it. But I won't lose you." The words hit me like lightning, stealing my breath. I pulled her into me, our lips meeting again, this time slower, deeper. No fire of desperation, but the steady burn of truth. When we broke apart, I felt tears spill down my cheeks. "I'd love you," I said, the words finally free. She closed her eyes, resting her forehead against mine. "I love you too." We left the cabin together that afternoon, driving back into town with our hands intertwined between the seats. Every mile felt like a step closer to a battle we weren't ready for, but also like a promise we had made to each other. At the stables, the world hadn't changed, but we had. People went about their business, horses grazed in the fields, the sun climbed higher. But every glance thrown our way now felt sharper, heavier, as if the air itself carried the weight of our secret. We didn't say much as we unloaded our things. The silence wasn't empty anymore. It was filled with what we both knew. That tonight, tomorrow, next week, the world might test us. People might whisper, might judge, might try to break us apart. But Alyssa's hand brushed mine one last time before she walked toward the training ring, her eyes holding mine with a quiet promise. Whatever came, we'd face it together. That night, as I lay in bed replaying everything, I realized something. Love doesn't wait for perfect timing. It doesn't fit neatly into rules or expectations. It crashes into your life when you least expect it, demanding to be acknowledged, daring you to be brave enough to claim it. And though fear still lingered, so did hope, because no matter what tomorrow held, I knew one thing with absolute certainty. I had found something worth risking everything for. Love often comes when we least expect it, messy, inconvenient, and terrifyingly real. This story wasn't about following rules or keeping safe. It was about courage, about tearing down walls we build to protect ourselves, and daring to believe in something stronger. So let me ask you, what would you risk for love? Would you face the judgment of others? Would you step into the unknown just to hold on to someone who makes your heart race? If this story touched you, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, like this video, and share it with someone who believes in love that defies the odds. Because sometimes the bravest thing we can do is simply choose to love.